Hi, and welcome to an episode of the Jet Rails podcast. I'm Robert Rand, and today I'm joined by Vlad from Logic Inbound. We're going to be talking all about SEO as it relates to e-commerce and what you're doing wrong in 2020. SEO has always been a moving target. Nothing quite stays the same. But with no further ado, Vlad, would you do the honor of introducing yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show, Robert, first and foremost. So basically my background is I first started an app company at 19 with my cousin, just because there was no Bruce Lee quotes on the Android App Store. And I barged into his room, right? I'm like 18 at the time. And I'm like, there's no Bruce Lee quotes. And he was like, oh, why don't we just start an app together, just for fun, right? We didn't even think it was going to be a company. So let's just do it for fun. And so in middle school, my cousin, he built his middle school's website. So he was like, okay, I can code this thing. So we go in, we build this app. Before that, the other app he made for us is we just go to stores. We'd flip things at different, bookstores. And he built this app. So if you scan a book, it'll tell you whether you should sell it or not on Amazon. It'll do all the packaging costs, etc. And so basically we built this app, and then in 2 weeks we got 1,000 downloads. And I thought, wow, 1,000 downloads, maybe we could do 30 of these, and then see what happens. We end up, about a year and a half later, getting 300,000 downloads. And I thought to myself at that point, wow, Zuckerberg, Schmuckerberg, business is easy, which whenever I thought that, things have not gone well, especially this COVID year here. And so that was my first company. I was making a couple $1,000s a month, but still not enough to fully sustain myself. So I was like, okay, let me start a real estate CRM. It's a B2B business, right, versus a B2C.
Definitely whet your appetite to say, look, if you were able to achieve that, first go round, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, man, this stuff's easy. Like, I don't know what everybody's complaining about. I was way too cocky for sure. But I thought, maybe I'm better than average at this. So then basically I ended up doing a B2B CRM company, did a whole bunch of cold calls, sweated nonstop. And I got into about 15 different, at the height of that business, I got into 15 different brokerages in five different locations and 15 brokerages. And, our biggest deal I lost was like 200K. And, we were making like 5-6K a month. And basically, I was like, wow, we're getting better at this, but still I need to learn how to get clients. And that's why 5.5 years ago, I started Logic Inbound. And basically Logic Inbound, our first year, we did everything. And then year 2, we merged with another SEO company that did SEO specifically for about 6 years. And we had our own software tools my cousin built out. That's why this guy wanted to merge with us. And this is what we've been focused on since then. My team today collectively has over 40 years of experience in SEO. We've started and sold our own knife e-commerce store. We've, built affiliate sites and taken them from 0 to, 6 figures plus. We did over $500,000 last year, and I run a team of 10 people. And it's a crazy, fun roller coaster ride.
So I always ask about the names. How did you wind up coming to Logic Inbound? Were you just checking GoDaddy for available, domains and you locked one in? Or
okay, so that's a great story, question. Actually, nobody's ever asked me this on a podcast. So for the first company, it's called Shoplets. Shop LLETES, and this is how you could tell this company was started by teenagers. We were like, what should we call the company? Well, business has something to do with shopping. That's how much we knew. Let's shop, encourage people to shop. We'll call it Shoplets. So if somebody types in like Shoplets app, they'll see some archaic, apps that just literally are from '08. And so basically that was the first one. The second one is called Skyreel. And this one was, I think my friend Justin named it that, before we even made a real company. We were like, oh, let's make our dreams come true, make the sky real. This is how much thought we put into the stuff. The third company, we started it because we thought Volt Shark sounded cool. However, then we were like, Volt Shark, that's kind of a weird name. It has nothing to do with inbound marketing, right? And so we're like, okay, Logic Inbound sounds better because we're going to specialize in inbound marketing, right? We're just going to go all in, and we're going to use our logic to there's like a play on words of inbound within yourself. You got to use your logic to succeed. So you're like, okay, that's a pretty cool name.
You really like company names that say what they do, at least to someone that, that knows the backstory.
Dude, you have no idea, because I actually thought, like, man, this name is so like the other company that we partnered with at the time, Tyler, Seattle WebWorks was the name of his company. And I was like, this is such a much better name, Seattle Web. Like, if I could rename the company, it would be SeattleMarketing.com or SEO.com or something. Like, I feel like the names that give people a picture of what the company does is so much better. I know we're accustomed to, like, Twitter and, Facebook and Zillow and all these random companies with random names. Amazon, like, who the hell knows what these companies do? I think the founders just don't at the time. But I think the best businesses have names that, like, what the heck they do.
Yeah. Well, and that's why a lot of them have to come up with creative logos that show you. But I think it is interesting. You get to a certain point where there's just enough awareness already where you break through, and the name doesn't really, have to tell the story anymore because it's just a known quantity. So if you stick around long enough, in a lot of cases, it works out. So you mentioned that, why this other SEO company saw value in what you had. You had some proprietary tech that you'd created. What about in the reverse? Was there something in particular that you saw about that company that you really said, hey, they're going to make my life and my company better if we merge together, and they're going to improve the growth trajectory?
Yeah. When we first started, we didn't even do like 100K, right? Like, it was literally like, we started Skyreel Marketing, right? So the business is really probably about 6 years old, because for half a year we did the CRM company, right? And this goes for anybody out there. If you start a business, I would say, it's pretty good to test it on the side before you just go all in. So we did about 6 months worth of, and especially if you got another startup or something, right? Granted, I wasn't as ambitious with this third project, because I was like, I need to make a living. I'm getting older now. I'm getting, gonna hit the 30 plus club, et cetera. I was like, I'm not 21
I feel terrible
anymore.
for you.
What I've noticed, everybody that's older says the next, whoever's younger than you is like the youngest, et cetera. But, I was like, I want to do business for the rest of my life. I don't want to just kind of work for somebody, et cetera. Even though I think now there's benefits to both paths. But back then I was scared shitless of doing this, because I used to work at a job at Safeway, pushing carts around. And, and I was like everybody's janitor boy. I was a courtesy clerk. I was below a checker, basically, at that point. And it's a hard job, respect to them. And then I worked at a music store, which I thought I'd love. However, it's not as fun when people are just customers. It can be cruel sometimes. It depends on the service industry. So I was like, I don't want to work for somebody. I thought that, 6-figure plus jobs were similar, and I don't think so. I think it all depends on the job. But anyways, to go back, we ended up, well, wait, hold on. What was the question? I completely lost train of thought.
And this is how I get you to spill the beans on things that you never intended to.
No, I'm happy to. Yeah.
So this other company that you merged with, what were you thinking? What were you seeing in them that was really so valuable to you?
So I was going in the right direction. I just completely got engrossed in these other two jobs. So basically he provided insurance for these two jobs, right? So if you think of my mindset, I was like, man, I don't want to do these two jobs ever, et cetera. I don't want to get in that position. This guy was making, which I thought was crazy at the time, was 150K a year, by himself. So I was like, you multiply that, et cetera. Like most agencies, it's just like a glorified one-person contractor. So he had all the systems in place, and he was getting because we were just around for 1 year. So we didn't have enough time to really test our results. He knew everything he was doing in SEO, right? So I was like, we can actually be pros, and we don't have to pretend like, like everything's okay. Because in the marketing world, Robert, as you know, that being your background, a lot of times when you go into an agency, it's not like you have a home run on any campaign. And nobody talks about this, right? Nobody says, hey, I'm like, it's like baseball where you get, 50%, or 75%. And there's a saying also, one of my friends, Craig Lerner likes to say. He says, in the marketing industry, if you get one new client in the segment, then you're an amateur. If you get two clients, you're a world-renowned expert, right? And like you tell everybody, like, I'm the greatest in this field, right? So, so he had that. He had great results, and versus us, if you'd pitch to us, it's not like we'd rip anybody off. In fact, I remember my first client was paying me $40K a month, and I charged him $400 to manage that because I did not know what I was doing. But basically, long story short, he had results. So that's what we were going after. We were going after that. We were going after the insurance that, hey, we don't have to work anymore. This is kind of going to be the blueprint. We can kind of have a quote unquote mentor here. He was about 8 years older. So we were like, this guy, is more wise. We didn't know anything, long story short, but it was good. I still don't regret it. I don't regret any of the partners. Then I brought on a second partner later for sales. That didn't go great either at all. Right.
Sales is tough. I think it might be, from my experience, the highest turnover area. I mean, especially, you're talking B2B, you're talking selling something that, that's a long-term service. When we're talking SEO, that people, have to wait for results. It's a moving, target. And I think that's part of what's interesting that, that you brought up, that not every campaign is going to hit it out of the park, because if it was, everyone would go and pay for it, and everyone would be in the number one spot, which is obviously a physical, impossibility. Because you don't know and can't control what others are doing, you can't control what Google's doing, you can't control what the competitors to a website that you're optimizing are doing, and various other things in between, a lot of things. You can hypothesize, and you can know from experience that if we do X, Y, Z, and W, these are the deliverables, and these are expectations to be set. But guarantees are a whole other story. Even Google publishes, all over the place. Anybody that's promising you these specific results or other things, you shouldn't be hiring.
Yeah, no, 100%. And business owners don't understand that sometimes. They don't understand right? It depends on which levels you're speaking at, right? Yeah. Once they hit, I would say, plus 500K, they start getting more ideas. I think $1 million plus is when people really start understanding, hey, there's something called ROI. And basically, for every dollar I spend, I need to make X dollars back. So you can't make $1 million on $500, right? Et cetera. And to go back to that point about sales, yeah, sales is very tough. It's very scary, but I feel like that's because it's unknown. Mm-hmm. If you knew the customer was going to ask these, I even learned that in my second company. It's a slow lesson that I'm still needing to learn. Every time you have an interaction, you need to document that process out in your company. In fact, we have a sales repository. So at the end of, it's like a database. So at the end of every sales call, I go back and I update the notes. And so if you know, right, what the interaction with the customer is going to be, then you can get much better after every iteration, right? Mm-hmm. So I hired this person, but really in retrospect, what should have happened is I should have went in and said, okay, Vlad, you're going to have to feel the pain and then get better. I thought at the time, hey, I just hire this person, they figure it out. And then I hire people to figure everything out for me, right? Mm-hmm. Which in some sense does work, I think. I really do believe in that, but you've got to be big enough to actually take those risks and experienced enough to know who you're hiring, et cetera. I had neither,
and hiring, you can go through the best process ever and still be surprised at the outcome. And it's one of the reasons why I think that, companies fight so hard to retain talent. Nobody wants the brain drain. When you get someone that's really good at sales, I mean, I'm very lucky here at Jet Rails that I'm not in sales, and I've got great counterparts that I rely on to do a phenomenal job there. Mm-hmm. And we're talking industry veterans. They've already worked out those kinks, and there's something beautiful about that, because as opposed to necessarily being so hungry all the time that they're really trying to overwork the prospect, they can sit back and say, look, we're here to help, and we're here when you're ready, and here are things that we can recommend, whether or not you do them with us or this or that, but they can be solution providers, they can be consultants, and not really have to be the old fashioned salespeople trying to sell this fixed product, but more looking at what are your pain points and how can we help alleviate those and how. And I think that that's a lot of what the industry requires, but it's very hard to get someone in on day one for SEO or for anything else of its sort that are really going to excel in that way. It takes time to really work through that as part of a team.
Yeah, no, for sure. 100%. It definitely takes time. I think that's the part that people, I was reading about Amazon yesterday, and you can look at their shareholders reports. They grew pretty fast. Like year one, they did like 1 million. Then year two, they did like 1 million to 10. Year three, they went from 10 to like 140 million, and then they grew. But even Bezos, right? His plan was like a 10-year plan, right? Or like if you look at the biography of the greats like Musk, et cetera, right? Like they have such long journeys, and it's all a slow journey. But to your point about sales, actually, one thing I would say, I've learned to not fear it as much, right? Like I went from literally this woman on the phone, I was apologizing for being a salesperson, which I think is so foolish. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not a salesperson. I'm not trying to trick you, because that's what I thought, right? She's like, clearly, sir, you're not a salesperson. That's how bad I was. My best deal, I closed like a 6-figure plus website development project, right? So like I went from that to 6 figures plus deals, 10K a month, 7K a month, et cetera. Plus.
And the trick to that is also, it's not just being able to sell it, but it's not overselling it. It's managing expectations and having the right sale. Because if you sold let's say $100,000 website that should have been a $200,000 website, there's nothing but tears at the end of that project.
100%.
No matter which way it goes, it's not going to go well.
For sure, right? And when we close some of these deals, right, when they just say yes without blinking, you're like, oh man, they didn't even blink. Like I could have gone for more, et cetera. But basically, I've learned that the best salesperson is really your advisor, right? Like they do some financial advising here as well. And even though they're selling the product and they're charging them, they're trying to think about, hey, what's the best part? And you might wonder, like, what the heck does sales have to do with e-commerce, by the way, on the other side over there? So when I first started, our online knife store, et cetera, with the team, when we did that project, right? And I've done others too. I've done headphones from Alibaba. That's the old trick, right? You go to Alibaba, you get the product, et cetera. You negotiate prices with vendors, et cetera, right? So you're convincing someone somewhere, right? And I would say that's the main thing. But yeah, marketing though takes time. So and there's nothing better than not having to do anything, just people.
Yeah. And it depends, so I've certainly had experience where, I've enjoyed being able to come in and say, this is this is our proposal. We stand behind it. Unless we're pulling something out of it, this is our best rate. And this way, that up front, or we've already applied whatever it is to it. This is what it is, because it is a tough dance sometimes. And it's not that there are people, I think, that because they do it in other facets of their lives, other facets of their jobs, that they like to haggle. They like to feel like they got to win. At the same time, though, so let's say if I was selling web development and I know what my cost on it is, and I know what my supply of it is in terms of available web development, pipeline that's not sold, and basically, like I'm not going to tie up my pipeline with something that's not going to turn a profit. All risk, no reward. When I know that I can fill that pipeline with someone else, it really does depend. I think when you're earlier on, and especially once you start bringing on, payroll, once you start bringing on others, you're hungry to make sure that you sell enough to be able to make ends meet, to be able to pay everyone. And then I think that there is that growth pattern where if you're doing it right, you get to the point where there is enough. And so you don't have to be as aggressive in negotiating the sale. You can stand up on your own 2 feet and say, basically you're a steakhouse. No, I'm sorry, sir, but that's a $50 filet mignon. There is no discount available for that. And, but it's the best in town. And we know you're going to leave happy. And no one else is gonna provide you anything better than that. That's for sure. And you do that, and, and I think that's certainly something that I've always enjoyed, getting to that point where you know that you're taking good care of people, you know that they're happy, you know that you're bringing them value, you know that you're not specifically overcharging, but that you've hit that sweet spot in industry. And that maybe even that that there are people that are charging more than you are. It's often the case. It's rare to find, especially in something like SEO, to find the person that charges the most, right? But that at the end of the day, that you've got enough there that even if, let's say, this is a campaign that's not moving as well, you can kick in a little extra for them. You can throw some more resource at it. You can do what you need to do so that they leave smiling. And I think that's a big part of the challenge, is that balance. But I'm going to go back to something I brought up, not being able to control the different things happening that are impacting SEO. And, I've been engaged with SEO for years and years, but I stopped doing it on an agency level about 3 years ago. And so while I absolutely, try to keep up with the day-to-day changes, I remember huge algorithm changes like Panda and Penguin and Hummingbird coming out, and these things that were coming in chunks. And what's going on now? Are changes in algorithms from Google, and it's still mostly Google, of course, that impacts the world, because they've, here in North America, they've got
95+%.
Yeah, they
until
own the market.
DuckDuckGo takes over. Yeah.
So until then, are they big algorithm changes coming out that are really changing how sites are ranked based on factors, or are they small changes, or are the changes pretty minuscule and just not having as big an impact? SEO just isn't changing much. What's your experience?
I would say it goes back to your model, right? Like, are you looking at it from a white hat, gray hat, or black hat perspective? Which I don't know, in terms of level of audience sophistication, but obviously white hat would be like you're following all of Google's rules perfectly, right? And then gray hat is, philosophy is basically like, I'm going to mix in some stuff in there that I shouldn't be doing, but I'm kind of at the pushing the borders, right? And then black hat is like, I don't care, I'm just completely breaking the rules, right? For the black hats out there, you can't do private blog networks anymore. So basically, you can't go in, you can't really, it's very hard to quote unquote game Google, right? But I always find it a bit hypocritical on the internet. And I always tell my clients this, it's not that I hate Google or anything, like they're a fantastic company, but I think it's a bit hypocritical that they want you to be found online, but they don't want you to tell them or show them how to find you, right? It's like, they're almost like the Michelin man of the internet nowadays, right? Where it's like they go in, they rate you at your restaurant, and it's like, but you just got to focus on creating a great website, but they won't tell you what makes it a great restaurant or a great website or the factors, right? So it's like, I think even the Michelin man tells you, right?
I think if the Michelin man walked into a restaurant, the guy the mascot that looks like a bunch of tires stacked up, I would recognize him.
Sorry, not the Michelin man, the Michelin reviewers.
Yeah, the reviewer.
Right?
I got it.
Yeah,
so I couldn't help
Michelin
myself.
Star service. I basically mixed them up because the same company.
Oh yeah, same. Absolutely. And not everybody knows that those Michelin star restaurants, that it all goes back to, the
Michelin
same
man.
organization.
He's in charge.
Yeah, he's very judgy.
That guy. But yeah, the Michelin restaurant reviewers, which started by Michelin, I don't know why, but basically,
look, if somebody has the right to kick the tires on a place and see if it's any good, I think it's him.
That is funny. That is very funny. That's very funny.
I've now destroyed your train of thought. I'm going to continue to do so for the next.
It's completely okay, but I'm still sticking to this reviewer mindset, right? Like Google's like, we're going to review your sites, right? Like the Michelin people, we're going to throw a Michelin man in there just so you don't understand what we're doing and why, right? Just this is confusing as my example here, but still at the same time, right? That's the hypocrisy. So we've got it down to 3 things. So it's content, which is it's on-site and off-site, right? So what is on-site? We have content on there, your website content, then the website quality factors, and then the technical factor, which is website quality, and then the link building, right? So link building, content, and technical, those are the 3 things we always look at. and they've worked well for us, right? Sometimes, I basically look at the first page of Google for a specific term, and I feel like they're just going to test a site, right? And I'm like, this site's not going to last. Like, these guys have no links built to them, etc., and they're on the first page ranking for, whatever, right? Buy tires, just to stick to the Michelin example, right? Mm-hmm. Like, these guys, Google's just testing stuff out. But most, and inevitably those websites fall. But most of the time, right, you're still looking for a great link profile, great backlinks, great content, and good technical factors. If anything, Google, I feel like, has helped us more nowadays with, they have a mobile test. You can type in Google page mobile test. You can type in, Google page speed optimization, and they'll give you like endless amounts of homework to improve your website. But in terms of link building, and I don't know how technical you want to dive in, Robert, but basically you can't really do PBNs anymore. Like, that's just going to be inevitably, Google's just going to find all of those. Everybody on in terms of links, right? Like, they're still buying links. And nowadays it's just standard for people to, whenever you're doing guest blog posts, like they have to charge you no matter what. It's getting much harder and harder. Link costs are going up, which I think might be good for Google. So that's kind of where the industry's trending in terms of like updates, right? If you want to talk Penguin, et cetera, not too much has changed. I would say from my perspective, everything's just going more mobile. So that's really,
It's interesting. We see a lot of Magento sites that use some of those Google tools to check their page speed scores, their insights, and in many cases they fail pretty miserably because the technology of Google's tool doesn't really like the coding in a Magento site, even if the site's fast. So we do a lot of work to, help bring those scores up, knowing that Google may be looking at some of those things in their algorithm, and that, for SEO purposes, it's a big deal. So we see sites go from single digits sometimes in their mobile page speed scores, going up to the multiples and multiples of double digits as we make adjustments. How big a deal is loading speed? On the web hosting side, we talk about it a lot, the same way that we talk about scalability and the reliability and stability of the site and the security of the site and all these things that sort of protect those SEO rankings and make sure that the users are having a good experience consistently. Is speed really one of the top factors these days? Is it possible to rank reasonably with a slow site at this point?
That's a fantastic question, by the way. The joke in the industry is it depends, but obviously I'm going to give you a straight answer too. I think from a scale of 1 to 10, I would give loading speed in terms of SEO, I would give it about a 7. In terms of, e-commerce sites, that's a 10, right? Because in e-com, as you know, for every second delay that the user experiences, that's something like a 10%, drop off in sales, right? For every second or like half second, right? People were like, screw this, etc. From Google's perspective, the reason I said 7, I think it depends on your search term, right? Are you checking the time or the news or whatever, like latest news, etc.? And is it like short-term informational content where you're just going in and you just want to quickly check on something, right? Like, did the Seahawks beat the Falcons, which they did, by the way? Go Seahawks. I'm a Seahawks fan, right? If you're doing that, then obviously I think Google would want you to have a very fast loading time because it's like a quick check, right? So in my mind, I'm not going to pretend like I know Google's algorithm, right? In our book, I would say it's loading speed is an important factor. On the technical side, the number one factor we look for obviously are no broken pages, right? So no 404s. We want to make sure we have 301 redirects for all those pages. If anybody out there hasn't done this yet for their e-commerce site, you want to
Google will give you the data out of Search Console, out of what we have historically referred to as webmaster tools. They'll tell you what pages people are trying to go to that are leading to a 400 error. Same way that if you've got server errors, if you've got 500 errors, there's no reason that you shouldn't be fixing that stuff pronto.
Yeah,
that your host shouldn't be helping. Yeah,
100%. We like to use a tool called Screaming Frog to actually
crawl
do
the
that.
Site,
Yep, crawl the website. But on the flip side, in terms of page speed, right, I would say it's definitely in an e-commerce person's mind the top one of the top factors. And that's obviously where a hosting company comes in, right? And somebody like you, Robert, at JetRails, I think becomes very essential to them. If they're using any of the random brands out there, some GoDaddy, et cetera, most of the time, GoDaddy speeds aren't as amazing as they advertise to be. It depends. I don't think they're getting as popular nowadays. We like to take people actually off of them when we're helping them with the site.
So I'll be kind to my friends at GoDaddy, but at JetRails, we optimize the hosting around your website. We tweak to really get that speed where it needs to be. It's holistic. You've got your content delivery network, and you've got different caching technologies and other optimizations in play that, aside from the fast hardware and the up-to-date software that's running as fast as it can, and all these things coming together, it's configuration and tweaking and getting it just right, because we know it makes a difference in the bottom line of an established business, whether they're, mid-market or enterprise or whatever it may be, that it absolutely is worth the time to get it right. I'm going to pull you back, though, towards some of that backlinking, because the more I think about it, there used to be more places to go build backlinks. We launched a blog post a few months back about maybe some of the best places that e-commerce sites could leverage to build healthy backlinks in 2020.
Fantastic.
And we polled some audience for that. Got some folks to throw down ideas. If we don't have you in there, I'm sure as soon as we wrap this up, you're going to give me a great quote. But
for sure.
Where is it that people can go? Because like I say, so many places are now providing no follow links. It's not necessarily counting the same way that it did before. Some of those older link schemes that people engaged in of building, content just for the sake of links that really had no value on its own, isn't going to work the way that it might have in the past. So, if you're an e-commerce site and you're trying to really build up that domain authority, that domain ranking, what is it that you do? Is it press releases? Is it you tell me, is it articles on particular sites that you can launch on, like news sites? Help a reporter out, Harrow. What is it that you think really moves the needle these days?
Yeah, Harrow's a good classic answer, by the way. I've heard so many times now. I feel like everybody should know of Help a Reporter Out. In terms of link building, right? The two things, right, for the listener out there. In terms of knowledge, right? I look at it as a voting system. That's the metaphor I always give, right? And so basically, you want other websites to link to you, right? If you're on Facebook, you click on a Facebook. When you go to YouTube now, YouTube got a vote from Facebook. They're saying, hey, check this website out, right? And you want people to go from their site to your site, ideally. So first of all, I would say sales is the right mindset. That's why people don't like link building, right? Because you're convincing someone to do something, to link to you, to say, hey, check this person out, to advertise you, right? And, the best people can do it without actually bribing other people or spending money. Of course, sometimes people do. I would say it's getting a lot more uncommon where people will pay other websites for guest blog post links. It can be a little risky. So anyways, long story short, sales, right? So the way I approach link building is, I would say, definitely not traditional, a little bit different. I tell my clients, hey, take a look at your field, right? Let's pretend we have, I've got a palm tree company, palm tree in my background here. So basically, let's pretend you're selling trees, right? Now, what you should do is you should look for other companies in your industry that would either A, make you a brand expert and, other people would check out that are related. How can you collaborate to get their kudos? And what would they want from you for them to actually mention you, right? You have to sell them to put yourself on their site. So stuff like testimonials, this is everything you can give to them. That's how you got to think about it, right? What kind of value can I give to somebody else? So the way you can give other websites value is you can give them testimonials, right? Obviously, you can give them content in the terms of guest blog posts. You can leave valuable comments with, obviously there's a backlink there as well. You can actually create a profile on their site, so that's like social media link building, Twitter, Instagram, etc. So what we look at our company is we actually do a link analysis. So we'll see what kind of links does this company have. Does it have a social media backlink? Does it have a a bunch of guest blog posts? Does it have comments? Does it have infographics, etc.? And we'll try to fill in the gaps. And the best strategy is, takes a ton of time, Robert, really, and that's why we actually use tools for this. But we look to see what kind of links that people actually have on the first page, right? Do they have 10 guest blog posts, 20 comments, 30 infographics, etc.? And then we'll go in and we'll make those social media profiles, etc. So that's how we build out the reputation. And then we'll also ask the best companies, how many partners do you have, right? Do you have 100 companies that are willing to give you a testimonial, etc., right? You should go ask them if you can give them a testimonial and get a link back. So there's a lot of different strategies, but the mindset is sales, right? Like, I'm trying to convince somebody and give them value in exchange for a backlink. Sometimes it's money, but it's probably not the best way in money. And then with that philosophy, I would look at it really like you're looking at it as good PR, right? So you got the sales mindset. You're trying to convince somebody to give you a link in exchange for this PR. And even if it's a no follow link, by the way, like on YouTube, those still actually count. No follow links actually still count. Obviously, follow links are a lot better, right? Do follow, but I would say if you can't get any, still get a no follow. Google still counts it. And the little dirty secret is that Google actually prefers YouTube and their own platforms in their own algorithms. I think that's something that Rand actually published recently, and I agree with him from what we
Mr.
found.
Fishkin.
Mr. Fishkin, yeah. Yeah, his brother's a partner. So Evan Fishkin is a partner at our agency. And because of that, we've been able to get a lot of great experience working with larger companies, because he's worked with everyone from, Whirlpool to, Panasonic, et cetera, like large level clients, So, yeah.
Yeah. And does that mean that you wind up using a lot of Moz tools? Do you still look at domain authority, or I know that Rand's not there anymore?
Because of Evan, that's funny. Because of Evan, we've Evan in his own right has been doing SEO for 16 plus years. The guy loves. I've never met somebody that loves SEO, right? Like he's the encyclopedia of SEO, And so if you ever want to have him on an episode, he'll super geek out. But basically, because of him and my cousin also, who's very technical, we've actually can use every tool, right? SEMrush, Ahrefs, Moz. We have our own proprietary tools that we've built in-house as well that I can show you even. But yeah.
Cool. All right. So sounds like other than proprietary tools, I haven't missed too much. A lot of the stuff that's been strong in the last few years has been continuing forward. That's always
what
good.
I've said. So in terms of if you're going to go, it sounds like you've been doing white hat SEO, right?
Always. I mean, as all those, luckily, and it wasn't just me. I was part of a team, right? But as we changed things up, ongoing, we never had a big drop off around a Google algorithm update. We never found that, that our clients suffered because we did something that was black hat. We weren't keyword stuffing. We weren't, masking things. We weren't building, buying completely, junk backlinks that were going to backfire. Sometimes things stop being valued the way that they were at an earlier time. People and I'm sure Evan would commiserate with me, there's a time when if you started to put in the right keywords in the meta information and do some other basic things, build a few links, and all of a sudden, a couple of weeks later, you had a site ranking and on page one. There were a lot few websites back then. The algorithms were a lot easier. So I can't say that things didn't evolve and that strategy didn't need to evolve, but we weren't dealing with penalties. And that's a core difference, that it's a lot easier to come back from, okay, well, some of these links aren't valued the way that they were. Some of the content, was short, and now we need to elongate it in order for Google to feel like it's more valuable or whatever it may be. But, but it held true. And let's come back to, so a lot of our users are in e-commerce. We support people with WordPress and Drupal and other CMSs, but we work with a lot of users that are specifically in e-commerce. what challenges do those users face? Because I guess in that sense, backlinks probably aren't going to be that different for them than for anyone else. It's a mathematical thing. But what about dealing with content and on-site factors? Do you find that if you're pitching SEO to an e-commerce website, what goes through your mind? What's really radically different, if anything?
And we actually started and sold a knife store, by the way. Hobanco, Hobanco. It's still online. You guys can check out.
So if you mail me a knife, it's not something I should be worried about. You're not trying to send me a sign about what you thought about the podcast when it launched.
It's an endearing sign. It's
cool.
It means I care about you. But and that was, knives are actually so I was like, oh, knives, it's like a manly thing, like it's going to be so exciting. But then I took a look at, like the laws. You can't advertise knives with pay-per-click. And I'm like, man, I'm like playing with one arm behind my back here. SEO was still good though, for us, and we still got sales. But anyways, basically, to wrap that, we can wrap up link building. On the link building side, it's very similar to anything else. I mean, our process in general, there's really, by field, it doesn't really vary too much. It just really depends on, how much links are your competitors building, right? In e-com, it's a lot more competitive because that's all they can't sell, right? They can't do any cold calls or anything, right? So everyone's invested in all these processes a lot more. So you have to do a lot more link building. And in terms of how has Google changed in the last 3 years, right? 3 years obviously is a lot harder to notice than 10, et cetera. But I would say for 3, they're probably a lot more attuned to link velocity now than they used to be. So basically, when it comes to seeing how fast are you building links and how fast are you not building them and then reducing that speed to make it smooth. You can't really game it like you used to. Like you used to say, okay, I'm going to build 300 links this month, and I'm going to stop. And then basically we're going to rank for the first page, and we're all set. And now we can move on to the next keyword. Nowadays, everybody's gunning for that keyword if it's a good keyword, right?
So if you're stagnant, you're not going to hold your rankings. Oh, look at that.
Yep. Exactly, right. It's and same thing with the content. Obviously, you've got to keep it fresh. But on the link side, you've got to keep consistently building, or eventually they will catch up in a couple months, et cetera. So that becomes much tougher. Or if you're stagnant, like if you do 500 links and then you stop, right? I had a client recently with a 10K a month plus link building project we were doing for them. And basically we're building on these links. He's like, by the way, because of COVID, I was doing amazing. Now I'm not doing so hot, et cetera. And I was like, okay, well, we got to slow this link building process down smoothly. If Google sees that we're doing, you can't build links on purpose, which is crazy to me, right? Like you've got to do it accident. Everything in Google's world is like accidental, right? But that's the hypocrisy there. But so that's the link building. I think that's probably the biggest major change. And then obviously mobile, things are going more and more and more mobile. And then on the flip side, right? Let's go to content, right? You want the content to be fresh, right? Query deserves freshness, QDF. Basically, Google will give you extra credit for that. And then at the same time, basically, depending on whatever keyword you want to go for in terms of length, you should take a look at, what the people in the top 10, that's our simple rule. Look at what people in the top 10 page results are doing in terms of content length, right? That's how you calculate that. As you talked about meta descriptions and meta titles, H1, you want to have your keyword, in the H1 and the same one in the meta title, meta description, et cetera. So those are the main, components there. And as long as it's knowledgeable, good engaging content, you want to convert to. That's the art and the science.
Well, yeah, so you've got a 2-step process. You can get Google to rank the page, but now you have all this endless dribble of content or something. Is anybody ever gonna fill out a form or buy something in the e-commerce world? Two different things. So now SEO, there was a time when you could maybe have a particular length of campaign, a 6-month campaign, something, because you're not going to get anywhere in a month with it. That's not a thing. I mean, you could,
no way,
you could clean up some technical issues or whatever. Yeah. But you're not going to really have demonstrable results in that kind of a short period. But what I'm getting from you is that, and this, I don't think it's terrible news to people that have engaged in SEO before, but you've got to stay in some kind of a maintenance mode.
100%.
There is no stopping if you want to retain what you've earned.
No, for sure. Like the secret, it's not a secret anymore, right? That if you get on the first page, you've got to keep your position, by continuously at least doing like a maintenance or something. Because eventually, for instance, we had a wedding planner, right? This was like back when we were dealing with smaller clients, right? She kept her position for 2 years, right? And was the one-time 1-year project, right? And then 2 years after that, she remained. And I love to show people that. And now she's on page 2, right? Because people are wizened up today, right? And it's no longer as SEO kind of like, like they used to look at it like it's TikTok marketing. It's like, what does that even mean? But basically today, I think everybody's more competitive in this space, and it's only getting more competitive. So that's probably the main thing, Robert. I would say, if anybody out there is looking to engage, they got to make sure that everything they do is more consistent, and they show Google, hey, we're here for the long haul.
Sure. If it's e-com, I'm going to come back to that a little bit.
Focus there.
Is because you've got, usually, obviously, there are some e-commerce sites that have a handful of products. It's a very small site. But if you've got a site that's got any real quantity of categories and products, does that automatically make it a more expensive, bigger job? Because now in terms of working backlinks to those individual products and categories, in terms of working with the metadata and the other tags and and content of those pages, that there's it's a multiplier effect. Instead of having a 20 or 50 page website, now you have a 500,000, 10,000 page website.
Yeah, depending on how many products and keywords you want to rank for, obviously that's more work, and that means there's going to be more you need to rank for. And in e-com now, you can't just go in for major terms anymore, right? Let's say you just can't rank for lighters anymore, right? You have to go after like specific lighter brands, right? Let's say bake lighters, etc., and then work your way up. And we've had clients in different categories. We've had online stores, online e-com clients where we start with like a niche term, right? Like for example, if you're selling whatever t-shirts, right? You could say, are Gucci t-shirts fashionable, right? Like maybe that's like a long-term term you're going for, like a niche term, right? So you have to always niche down nowadays, right? And the search volume in those niches has decreased, because what used to be considered a niche, such as, let's say Gucci t-shirt, like now it's Gucci t-shirt fashionable. So it's like even lower volume. And then you have to basically pick up your pace there. And, in the beginning, you go after these long tail keywords. And then as you go on now, you can finally start going into the broader and more broad keywords and really niche down a lot more, which I think is probably better for the internet overall, right? As more websites populate it.
I would imagine. And about how many keywords is like a maximum to really go after in phase one of an SEO campaign? So they've got 100,000 products. You're not going to work on equal. I mean, yes, you'll improve the domain standing all, as a whole, and you'll clean up, help to advise on technical issues and other things that may, like speed, that may be holding them back. But you're not going to go in the first few months and optimize 100,000 different products, most likely.
It depends, right? It completely depends. If we're dealing with if one of our clients is a really big client, they have like, whatever, 1 million backlinks that they've built. They're one of these, Amazon type companies, right? Which we've had experience working with, right? Basically, they don't need to do any more link building, right? So if you think about it as link building, content, and technical work, they probably need a lot more technical work, because they've got to manage all these pages, right? You got to make sure they're on JetRails. There's your plug again, Robert. They have a good hosting provider. We've got to make sure they have no broken pages, et cetera, on the technical side, these bigger sites. And then also that they have fresh content that's appropriate length, right? And the way we find the length out, I would say the best answer for everybody is go and, do a keyword counter or a word counter tool, Control A, Control C, and then paste however long the top 10 results are, on the keyword counter, and see what the average is, right? Is there average person for whatever term, right? Let's say it's, e-commerce hosting provider, right? Is the average length 1,000 words that they're writing about? Then you've got to do maybe 1,100. I think when in fact, we used to rank for how long should a blog post be. And our article, that was on the first page for Logic Inbound itself. And our article talks about how every year the internet gets longer by 100 words. Every year, right? So 10 years from now, it's going to be, like 1,000 words longer every single article for whatever term. People are just consuming more online information. Forget books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it is pretty astounding when you really come down to it about how much information people can ingest in a day now, just off of their mobile phone that they're walking around with and glued to. And, talking about the times that we're in now, has 2020 seen any major changes in the SEO industry? I imagine that there are companies that were gung-ho for their digital marketing that now they're cash-strapped and they might not be. There are others that are doubling down, figuring that they'll come out ahead if they just get the rankings now, then maybe they'll have fewer competitors in the future. They'll really, own more of their niche. What are you seeing?
That's a great way to start ending the show, I guess. I don't know what the time is, but basically that's a good point for 2020, right? I think for 2020 overall for the internet, it's better from a consumer point of view. From a competitor point of view, from a business side, you wish people don't do SEO, right? You wish they don't do online marketing. You want them to stay away as long as possible, stick to your billboard ads, people, etc. Right? So e-commerce has blown up in 2020, which is great for the average e-com site. However, I'm seeing a lot more now wanting to start an e-commerce thing because they've caught on finally, right? Work from home, right? More people working from home. It's becoming a standard, right? I even believe in, 2 or 3 years when we're hopefully through all of this craziness, right? You meet somebody and they're like, oh, I work from home. You're like, oh, I know what you do. I used to do that, etc. Right? So people are a lot more tech savvy now. And so it's helping online businesses, competitors are increasing now though. So that's kind of where the industry is going. And, everybody's becoming more tech savvy. So that's a benefit.
Yeah. And speaking of benefits, obviously the main benefit of an SEO campaign is that you're going to rank in Google and other search engines, whatever's, making up that other 5% these days, Bing or what have you, DuckDuckGo. You're going to get people searching, finding you for the keywords that you want to rank for, and hopefully converting into some kind of a leader sale. Beyond that, what else are people getting in the process? Because I imagine your team is building content, publishing things elsewhere, building up, brand awareness. That in some cases, even things like if you're dealing with alt tags on images, they're doing a better job of helping visitors to their website that are, have certain disabilities that can't necessarily see that image the way that you and I do. Do you find that people see a lot of value in some of that fringe benefit, some of that secondary benefit that they derive from the SEO work that's being done? And is that really part of the core sale, or is that just something that people don't really think much about? They just like so many things in life, they take for granted.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of the factors that we talked about today, even, right, people will take for granted. They'll underestimate, hey, my website maybe has a second and a half of extra loading speed. Or, hey, all my title tags, like whoever's listening to this that runs an e-com store out there, right, might be, for most people, not all of them, right, might be like, oh, all my meta descriptions and meta titles, we never really put a lot of thought into them. We just knew, hey, my keywords should be there. But maybe, going to the next level, my keywords, my meta titles, my meta descriptions aren't optimized for my audience to buy, right? Or they're not as at least as good as the competitors, right? So all these little factors, right, they'll add up. And I think that's kind of one of the benefits of doing your homework and understanding SEO a lot, whether you're working with an agency such as ours, which collectively, we've got over 50 years of experience, with, some of the rock stars in the industry, or, if you're just going with a contractor or learning it yourself. I would say what I've learned over time in SEO is, once you think you know the game, and let's say, hey, here, we look at 3 main factors, but obviously there's you can multiply each by 10, right? Like you could say there's 10 things for content you need to learn, right? Not just H1, H2 is meta title, meta description. There's content length, etc. We haven't even gone into structured data yet, right? Which is more important today. Schema markup.
Yeah, rich
Because now,
snippets, and
yep,
absolutely.
rich snippets, yep, because Google is populating everything in what we call the knowledge card right now more often. So you can't really do a website. So it's like, what's the weather today, right? Because Google will just answer for you. But anyways, all these little things, right? They'll add up, right? I just gave you all these different examples. There's content, then there's technical, then there's link building, and that's kind of what people miss with SEO when they're failing in a campaign. A lot of times, people will come back to me and say, "Hey, Vlad, I've got the technical, I've got the content, I've got the link building. Why am I not ranking?" And I've done it all perfect, and I'm like, "You haven't." Right? Like, let's take a look. I open up, right, the hood. I go under the car, and I'm like, "Oh, look at that! You all these pages are broken, right? Or your site speed's too slow, right? Or you think your site speed's great, but on mobile, it's a completely different game, and like you completely missed the mark here, right?"
I mean, Google's almost like that HR person that you're showing your resume and you're trying to get hired, and okay, well, yeah, your education looks pretty good, and
Yep.
but your work history, what's with this gap over here? Like,
Yep.
this doesn't look, and all of a
Yep.
sudden you've got this stuff, and what's this font? I mean, dude,
Yeah.
like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And I think that people miss out on the fact that you're looked at a little bit holistically, that, like so many things in the internet, that the weakest link is what it's all going to come down to in so many situations. But, you add, I suppose, on top of that when you go through this overall SEO process, that, yeah, if you're working on speeding up your site and getting rid of errors and other things, your conversion rates are going up. That there are other things happening that aren't necessarily the thing that you're judging the success of the campaign on, because you're looking at traffic and overall, sales, or something that's putting ROI, money back in your pocket, return on your investment. But sometimes you miss out that, hey, that, those things that got fixed that improved the overall site experience improved the results of all of your other marketing campaigns.
Yeah, no, for sure. Right. At the end of the day, as far as I made fun of the Michelin man and Michelin reviewers for your restaurant, or I like your example better. The company Google's trying to hire you for the first page, and they're looking through your online resume.
That's copyrighted, trademarked. I'm sorry, you can't use it, Vlad. That's mine. I've used it for I can't tell you how many years, because it'll age me. But
that's funny. My favorite one is working with Google is like growing a tree. You can't rush it, right? But you've got to make sure you give it your website all the love, right? And then it will bloom eventually over time. But basically, at the end of the day, right, all the things that Google wants you to do is it actually is going to improve, right? At the end of the day, they've improved your website and help you get more sales, right? At the end of the day, the consumers, even Google doesn't win, the consumers win at the end of the day, right? Because we determine the market, right? Which is take a look at Uber and what they did to the cab industry, right? The consumers, they win, right? So that's what you should really focus on, and eventually either Google will catch up, or you'll increase
doesn't really
sales.
care about your website. They don't.
No.
They just care about if they don't bring people to results that they're happy with in their organic SEO results. That if why would we use them anymore? I mean, and once in a while, I still remember the Bing It On challenge, where Microsoft was saying, "Hey, look at these two screens and which results look better to you." And there were some cases where Bing was doing some better stuff, and that tech changes fast. Google absolutely owns the market today, but they know that if they don't play their cards right, something will come out there and they'll be overshadowed. That's why they've got all of this, audio technology where you can ask, Google Assistant questions, and you can do things, and they're trying to get through that audio processing and, image search, take a picture of something and let it, tell you all about what you're looking at. And all these things that, they're trying to predict the future, how we're all going to search then, and what our expectations are going to be, because they don't want to get left in the dust. Tech moves way, way too fast for that. Vlad, you've been really, really generous with your time today while we're still friends. I'm going to suggest that we work on wrapping up. Do you have any final thoughts to share before we do?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. and always, happy to help Robert. For final thoughts, right, I would say if anybody ever has any questions, right, on SEO, right, feel free to check us out, logicinbound.com, or send me an email, vlad@logicinbound.com. And, I'm happy to answer any questions, whether they're ecom related, or if you're like, man, my business is just seeing so the original founder and president of Moz, Jillian, people don't know she was the first CEO. I called her when I was 21. I was like, man, I'm just having not a good day. I want to quit this entrepreneur stuff, et cetera. And she was like, well, it sounds like you haven't driven the bus off the cliff yet and you got more in the tank, right? So it's like, whatever you guys need, whether it's some pep talk or really you want me to go in and say, hey, Vlad, I want to get more sales. Give me an analysis. Feel free to reach out, guys. And then on the flip side, for those out there who are more self-doers and, like to teach themselves, I would just encourage everybody every day, ask yourself, what can I do to make my website, to improve my website, right? To make my website number one. What can we do today? That one tiny thing. And then over time, you'll compound, right? As you build routines and practices around this, and you will inevitably succeed.
Awesome. Well, Vlad, thank you so much for joining today. I am going to make sure to share your email address all over the internet. And I don't know if I'll tag exactly what you do or what it's for, but for sure, I'll make sure that people no, it's really great of you to offer that. I can say from personal experience, including today, that it's always great to chat with Vlad. I always leave feeling like I've learned something and I'm better for it. To our listeners, thank you as always, and we look forward to joining you with several more podcast episodes in the coming weeks, and happy selling.